Okay, here we are at the end of not simply our semester together and looking at base, but really at the end, for me anyway, of the semester. I'm going to have a class later today, but basically the semester is coming to a close, and it has been a very satisfying one. It's been a very satisfying one for me. Being able to discuss base in this way, to be able to explore the possibilities, is something that, it's been very exciting to do. I'm actually looking forward to turning this into a really good basic textbook on the foundations of juxtaposition theory and the way in which juxtaposition operates. I don't, as you can tell, I don't have a formal class for you today. As a matter of fact, I have two things for you today. One is a gift, and I'll take you through the gift, and you'll be able to download that later. It is a PowerPoint that I developed I think 4 years ago. I'm not quite sure. I think 4 years ago or 5 years ago. I think maybe Andrea and Kathy perhaps have this. I'm not sure. But it's a very rare illustration. And I'm very fond of it. I don't know how well it displays in this particular format here online, because it's a slower process to change the illustrations. No, it's not from sequencing. It is, you'll see in a moment. But when you have it as a PowerPoint on your computer, and you can really, scroll through the images quickly, because it's one of the things that's so fascinating about this PowerPoint, is that in a way it expresses the whole beauty of the mechanical construct. Let me give you a taste of this. And there won't be any accompanying dialogue, so just sit back and, watch the movie. I don't know how well that views when you watch that. But it is really fantastic to see the whole construct, the way it unfolds, the way it spirals, the way it moves, how all the information just layers one on the other. I love particularly the graphic of it. The rectangular or box-like base, the triangular tone, the hexagonal color, the circle of the hexagrams. It's just a beautiful thing, and it's just something that I felt that going through all of this base material that I'm always in a situation as a teacher that because of the way my unconscious operates. Without students, the knowledge just isn't there, and these 10 weeks of being able to just have the time to focus on base has been it's been very rewarding for me. So this is my little gesture in that sense for all of you. For the rest of this, because given the density of all of this, we've never really had a chance just to talk about it, and it is our last gathering. So I really open it up to any kind of discussion that you'd like to have, one way or another. I'm trying to get a handle on your question, Adrian. You're speaking specifically of the other objects in the sense of the other planetary objects and the way in which their imprinting information operates. I assume that's what you're referring to. that information has a secondary influence because it is information that goes through at a cellular level. That is, it goes through in terms of the vast design crystal infrastructure that is in the vehicle itself. I mean, after all, we have millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of cells in our body, and they all have design crystals. And the filtering of planets, which is why that I don't discuss it, because it is very complex. That is, it's why it isn't in any of the work, for example, that I'm doing now in PHS and Rave Psychology. The reason why I don't deal with the planets is that in order to be able to understand their specific filtering, the filtering is actually something that is related to whatever their biological association or glandular association is relative to where they are in terms of the body graph itself. And it is those secondary crystals that filter that information specifically and only specifically in that zone. And that information, I mean, through the way in which information moves through the vehicle is also information that the primary design crystal has access to, but in no way is focused on. In other words, there is a hierarchy of imprinting that takes place in the vehicle. I think it's one of the most obvious things that I think one gets to see, and what makes human design so specific. That is, the orientation to the main imprint has always been there. That is, we have always worshipped the sun. We have always recognized its power. It was a central core theme of the development of astrology, the main imprinting of the sun. You can see that clearly in design. The combination of the sun, earth, and the nodes from the teaching that I received in my experience, they basically represented everything, in the sense that these are the major directives and everything is nuance. And one of the things that you see about the sun, earth, and the nodes is that they represent, in that sense, the internal, which means that the secondary thematics of the planet imprinting has no direct relationship to the actual brain system. In fact, its direct relationship is more oriented towards localized glandular function and the organs related to those glands. It is a very, very different, it's a very different kind of imprint. But again, it's an excellent question.
Well, I hope you can hear me over the din in this cafe. Since you gave me the gift of really waking me up to see that I was looking at the juxtaposed from the relative universe, I've been really trying to open up my conceptualization and grasp if base is actually flat or if there is even a geometric shape to it.
The only way that I have ever illustrated base is flat, in the sense that this is the graphic of it. And of course, when we think about it in terms of the crystal and the entry frequency, in that sense, base is always that first, in a sense, flat surface that interacts with the neutrino. So, graphically, the way the construct is built is that, there is then the base to the tone, and then I'm not going to be terribly successful at that, but anyway, you know what I mean. And then you get the color, and then of course around that you get the wheel. So, it's like the stupas that you see in the East. These sort of tower-like objects that are built with different shapes, and there's usually a triangle and a circle and a square as an example. And of course, what we get is this extraordinary field of the hexagonal color, because that's really where there is this enormous transition, the transition field that exists between this and the wheel. And But yes, flat in that sense. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I get from it.
Thank you. Yes, that was perfect, especially the stupa image.
Yeah, there's so many of the, when I began my process, I had no background in the I Ching. I spent many years looking at related things that obviously, were part of the whole Eastern, particularly Chinese, the 5 elements, acupuncture, the 12-year cycle, so many things that fascinated me in the underlying mechanics of their thought. I wasn't very impressed with interpretation so much. I certainly have never been a great fan of the I Ching. It's very difficult for me to separate the language from its time, things like that, whatever the case may be. Anyway, what attracted me, as with the I Ching itself, that is the mathematics and its relationship, obviously, to the genetic code. The 5 elements, I think that 5 is absolutely correct. The fact that it was interpreted with a primitive set of metaphors is only the limitation of its time. I think that it's clear that what the revelation was that led to the Chinese 5 elements is certainly something that is inherent in what we refer to as the bases. I think that the dimensional forces, and that these elements were part of life itself. I mean, they were present in the sense of being living forces, and forces that move through us, which in fact is what the dimensionality of juxtaposition and the whole base phenomena presents. When I think about the whole Chinese mathematics, it's like with the 12-year cycle. The 12-year cycle is a fascinating cycle. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Chinese calendar and their 12-year cycle. I'm a rat, a 1948 rat, and I have people that I know who are 1960 rats and 1972 rats, and I know some 36 rats, and it's amazing how similar rats are. I mean, as a rat. And I know multi-generations of many of the Chinese. And one of the things that's interesting about the 12-year cycle is the way in which you see the emergence of generational links. I have a goat son who has one of his grandmothers is a goat. I have a tiger son, and one of his grandfathers was a tiger. It's just interesting. And of course, what is fascinating about their mathematics is that they combine it. That is, I'm about to, not this year, but next year is actually a very special birthday in the Chinese calendar when you reach 60, because it is the 12-year cycle times the elements. That is, I'm not simply a rat, I'm an earth rat, as an example. And earth rats only happen once every 60 years. So it's it's interesting to look at those mathematical constructs, and for me it's just I don't know why I've digressed to that. I guess it was about the stupas in the East, but my attachment is with the simplest tools, and numbers and glyphs are as simple as we get. And there's such magic in numbers, and all that's lacking is the revelation of its time, I guess. There's a wonderful story. I don't know where I heard this. It was about somebody who was fascinated with Gurdjieff. And he was some American doing some postgraduate work on, I don't know, mysticism or this or that. And his thing was to write, he was going to write a dissertation on the teachers of a master, which is, it's an interesting approach. And so what he wanted to do was find all of the teachers that Gurdjieff had in his lifetime. And he had managed to round up a whole bunch of them from, basic teachers when he was in school and this kind of stuff. But the one that he was most interested in was some sheikh living in Saudi Arabia. And he tried many times unsuccessfully to find this man and so forth and so on. Anyway, eventually he finds him, and he gets an audience to see him, and the sheikh asks him what he wants. And it wasn't that he didn't know. He just asked him what he wants, and he said, well, the kid sort of flustered, the young man flustered, and he said, I'm looking for the teachers of Gurdjieff. And the sheikh said to him, is Gurdjieff alive? And again, quite flustered, this young man said, well, yes, he's dead. Don't you know? He's been dead for a number of years. And the sheikh looks at him and says, well, why don't you go find a living master? And I always thought that was a lovely tale. I guess it's apocryphal. I don't know if it's true.
I find it very apropos, since we're talking about the possibility of wrapping the mind around something that's beyond words.
Isn't it interesting, though, how a simple formula can reduce everything, or take everything and pull it into it? See, that's the thing that I like so much about bass. Every level for me has its special magic. Tonal architecture to see the cognitive plan, the specialness of color, this unique, attractive frequency, because I think it's something to really grasp about color, is that it's so attractive, at least to the magnetic monopole. And of course, it is the link between, in a sense, what we see as juxtaposition and the relative domain. I mean, that's what makes color so unique. I mean, color is this bridge between, the underlying infrastructure and the illusion on the surface. And, and line, obviously, how illusion is established, the quality that the illusion will bring, and will the illusion be conscious or will it be unconscious, and will it be defined or undefined, and will it be this or that, and, all of the things that go with it. But back down here at this level, at the base level, it's as if you see all the underlying principles in their purest form, the way in which everything is designed to act through tension, the tension of the corners, the very brilliance of it, the simple perfection of the construct. And for me, this is when you read the mythologies of alchemical adventure, I look at these graphs and I just, as I do now, have a broad smile on my face. It is such an extraordinary distilling of knowledge, I guess. It's the thing that impresses me the most about what juxtaposition is and the way that it works is that the vast complexity, because it's a vast complexity, and yet at the same time it isn't. It isn't. It's sort of like, the vast complexity of life, it seems, but it isn't. It isn't. The vast complexity of what it is to be a human, but it isn't. And it is this stripping away the, all the verbiage and all the philosophical assumptions, and then just, seeing the construct. And what I like most of all, I guess it goes back to the stupa, is that this is eternal. It's not new. I mean, new is the nine-centered being. That's new. The body graph is is a matrix that is brand new and has never been seen and never existed before. But it emerged out of everything that's always been there. And you see, for me, when I look at base, because I see it within the context of the eternal of the personality, I'm looking at something that transcends all concepts of time. It is, it's the great moving formula, and it is the infrastructure that permits this illusion to exist. And just to be able to see it, to look at it, let alone to truly understand it, just to see it, to grasp it simply on the surface. It was like those illustrations that I shared with you last week, which, as I said, I had never shown anyone. It's just so incredible what you can learn from that. The way these relationships operate, in the structure itself, it tells you everything about what's going to be the world and how it's going to work. It doesn't tell you how the cognitive process is going to have its sensory dimension, because that's not the point, nor how it's transmitted and turned into illusion, which is not its point. This is the whole framework. It's why it's called Beyond the Gate. It really is. It is an everything drawing. It's why I'm so fond of it.
One of the good laughs that I had was that when I started to really try and take myself away from the time-space continuum, and I found myself coming up with recognition of concept about direction and so forth. But ultimately what I realized is, because I'm base 5, it was very hard for me to separate this material out from literally the concept of space.
Oh, yes, that's quite true. That's quite true. I think that, my approach to relativity is, you see, when I look at juxtaposition and relativity as, as a construct, when I try to look for a metaphor, my metaphor is brain and mind. That's my metaphor for these two-dimensional groups. And that juxtaposition is the brain in that sense. It is the structure. And mind does not recognize brain in the sense that, despite the fact that we know that our mind is derived from our brain system, our mind seems to be suspended in its own very, very precise illusion. So for me, this is the relationship, and it's the way that I can deal with it then. It's the way that I can truly grasp what relativity is, because relativity is the great illusion. I mean, this is the relative, it's all relative. This is the great illusion, and in the same way that mind is the great illusion of the vehicle. I mean, it is the illusion producer of the vehicle. So I'm very comfortable with that metaphor, because I think it really, it gives you the potential to grasp the holistic of it. That is what happens, obviously, when the two of them, which are never separate, because of course this is, again, deconstruction can only separate them, that, this is all part of the fundamental duality that is the totality.
I also love it that there's this sort of paradoxical loop that came up for me, in that even when you say beyond the gate, I found myself working with my own variation of that Tibetan mantra that goes, go beyond that, go beyond that, go beyond that. And yet ultimately, in terms of verbiage, the only thing that I could say is that ultimately is that base is where I stand.
Oh, there's no question about that. And I think it's something to realize about the personality base anyway, is that we're talking about a 9-dimensional universe. And it's clear to me that the 5th base acts as an integrator between the relativistic and the juxtaposed dimensions. Because the whole thing is wrapped in this glorious illusion. See, for me, what I like most of all about base is that the great difference between base and line is that line is deeply personal and base is deeply impersonal. And it is only then that, you can begin to recognize that there is a part of you, however you operate on this plane, that there's a part of you that is connected to a very, very pure source that's always there. And I think, when you look at the way human design operates and the way in which we train and teach people, this goal of, correctness, that ultimately, what that leads to is, the personal being, in a sense, being left behind. I mean, you can't do that in relativity. The relativity is so egocentric or human-centric. And everything about juxtaposition is that it is non-personal, because of course it is not ever a direct participant in the illusion that it is the foundation of.
Is my impression that it might also be accurate to say that base is the diving board from which we enter the formless, also more or less in the zone?
I can remember the first time that I taught juxtaposition theory. It was in the Burgenland in Austria at Ilse's mill. And I had started to teach it from the base level. And I can remember that experience because I can remember after the second day, the second morning actually, when I had already reached tone, that I can remember going outside and saying to my associate that there must be something wrong, because I have never had such a flat response from a group of students. And it was only when I got to color, and color's direct relationship on the personal, that is on the motivation of the line and the motivation of the profile, that I could feel the classroom coming alive with genuine interest. And one of the comments that I made, and I said that if you're looking for the gods, you have to look deep, deep within. deep within, because we don't have conscious access to it. We don't have any kind of access to it. This search for God is really the search for your own base in that sense. I mean, it is the source. It is your source. It is your source of light. It is your source of itness. And that's the dilemma of the base, is that we do not have access to it. And what is so interesting for me is, in going through this process of opening up an understanding of the basic construct, whether that in and of itself, because of course it is a cliche of quantum, of the impact of observer and observed, that the recognition of base and the grasp of its function somehow perhaps attunes one more in that sense to one's own source. And if that's what you mean, that's what I can say. You have this thing about the seven-centered being. It is not knowledge that was given to me, Elfrida. What am I going to tell you? There were fabulous human beings with extraordinary revelations during the time of the Hindu Brahmin ascendancy and the emergence of the seven-centered construct. The knowledge of the seven-centered being exists. It is not graphically the same, obviously, as the construct that I was given for the nine-centered being. But then again, this is not something that needed to be revealed. At least that's my assumption in terms of the program, because it's already there. There is incredible mappings of the chakra system of the seven-centered being. There's very profound commentaries on the various streams, the secondary centers. I mean, I did my own research into the seven-centered being. But I don't think that, it's like MMI will not calculate a chart prior to 1781 because there is no point. And I don't think that there's any value in trying to artificially create some kind of seven-centered image that has, some kind of similarity to the form we're using. Again, my only comment on that is that, that's a subject that for thousands and thousands of years was explored. I mean, there's incredible knowledge on the seven-centered being. I mean, incredible knowledge. In answer to your earlier question, because I passed over that, Jacques, what does that mean? Well, it says certain obvious things. I mean, I think that if you have an incarnation in which you are always going to be dealing with corner separation, then obviously your relationship to others is going to be a dynamic principle in your life at some level, and that theme, I would assume, would emerge in one way or another on the surface. For me, there is no configuration that is better or worse, easier or not. You know what I mean. In other words, I don't want to get into any kind of comparative analysis. But obviously there are direct things that it would point to, and that's one of them. But again, remember something about what I'm referring to in terms of base not being personal. It isn't. And from just a base point of view, having a corner tension, simply means that, you're driven to align with the other corner tension, and the moment that you do, the moment that, the two corner tension configurations meet each other is the moment that, the whole potential emerges. So there are advantages to it as well. I mean, one of the things that we see about the nature of the construct is that built into the construct is the demand for social integration. Ultimately it is going to be the deepest genetic theme. So, having a corner tension is probably just a very basic instrument for establishing the demands of social interaction and the value of social interaction.
Although this is base is impersonal, as you said, it has an impact on the surface. Could we say that, or is it right to see that excuse me, the tension between the corners, the personality crystal being the so to say connected to the passenger? There is a tension, a dynamic between the passenger and the vehicle, and that will come up to the surface.
It's basically the same answer. Again, obviously there is a basic tension that is there. But again, you can never speak of base as if it automatically has a connection to the surface, because it does not. Base has to go through its process of, being the source upon which the tone is built, and the tone has to produce the color, and the color has to be properly integrated by the monopole. So by the time that you get on the surface, it may not look like that at all. So, again, it is much, 99% of the value of understanding base is not to see it so much in the personal aspect. I mean, yes, it's there. There's no question it's there. You're not wrong in seeing that. But again, if that being was absolutely correct, that is not a dilemma for them. It would simply be an attribute to the way in which they themselves would be living out their purpose. It's much more important to see base in terms of understanding the nature of being, because that's what it's about. It's not, I want you to be able to see the personal dimension, not because of what values it brings to the surface in the personal life, but to understand how you as a being are part of the dimensional construct. In other words, that you are a filtering agent that supports the very existence of the totality. That is why it is important for us to understand that, our crystals have a base, and that this is our essential contribution to existence. It gives each of us a unique and, in essence, a divine purpose in this life. So it's much more for me to understand and see the nature of being than it is to use analytical technique to bring it to the surface as if it's going to be a major theme. The differences between, design and personality are going to vary according to the construct on the surface. Adrian, I've been a musician all my life, and I had an interesting man that was a student of mine. You must remember his name, Andrea. I don't remember his name. I think he was wasn't he a quadruple split? And he created an instrument to be able to play the wheel. And Franz, that's right, Franz Cole. And I still have somewhere in my collection a tape that he made in which he played my design. It was interesting. And I actually sat in a room while he played the designs of two people that I knew. Again, that was in Burgenland, the mill. Interesting. They're closing the mill this year, and I'm going again in August for the last time. It was always an interesting experience there. But to get back to your point, it's a fascinating one. The dilemma for me is, the Chinese have the 16-tone structure for the I Ching. And it's very odd, and I'm not a fan of overtones, so I find it uncomfortable. I have never seen very good interpretations of the hexagram construct, and I think that that's really the key, is to figure out a way to actually be able to play the hexagram, because if you can figure out the hexagram formula, then you can begin to I would assume, be able to see the inner frequencies of that, and be able to get to things like, I would guess, color. To get down to bass and bass shift, geez, Adrian, I don't know about that one. That would be quite something. I get, theoretically, my assumption is that theoretically, obviously, that's possible. And I don't think that we could actually hear it as sound anyway. I think that we're talking about a frequency range that, though I guess you could put sound to it, would simply be, a digitalized mathematical formula for the whole progression. Because basically, when you look at the wheel, you are looking at what is a logical, symmetrical progression. It should be able to build the scale of it. But everything that I've seen from the transposing of the Chinese to the Western, it's odd. It was like France and his playing of people's designs. There were some things that it was amazing. Actually, there were some things you could really feel. A certain definition, as an example, that you didn't even have to guess at what it was. I mean, at least I didn't. But a lot of it was really kind of mulchy. So theoretically, I think it's possible. It takes that kind of a mind, though. I mean, I'm waiting for some young mathematical genius to fall in love with human design. I think that would be a real blessing, because there are some formulas that need exploring. We learn things through certain ways. We have a brilliant programmer in Azzy Farron, and just being able to see the dynamics of the construct from a programmer's perspective is fascinating, because you see the beauty and symmetry of the mathematics that underlies all of this. And it is one of my favorite things. But it's also one of my oldest mystical connections, Adrian, is with the relationship of the impact of sound, and the importance of sound, and the ability to transmit very specific information through sound formulas. It would be fascinating. It's funny about music and the way in which the mathematics of music have developed. It is, and it's so interesting the way it's so deeply divided between East and West. You can see that in Persian music. In my early years of touring in Germany, in the early 90s, I met quite a few Persians who were musicians, and I love music, and I'm not any music done well is. I'm as comfortable listening to opera as I am to hip hop. But to sit through 1 hour of overtone music, it's painful to my ear. I guess I have a very, very Western ear. It's just painful, and so I don't know. I somehow I think I prefer to see it in a formula than to actually have to listen to it. Well, it's been a pleasure, Debbie.
Yeah, I agree with you about the music. I live with an Egyptian, and I have to leave the apartment when he puts on the music. But on the surface, genetically, we're attracted to the opposite But since we've taken this class when I was in California, I live with somebody who's a second base, and I'm staying with Kathy now, and she's a second base, and I'm a second base. So below the surface, I seem to be attracted to a light bass. That seems to be a pattern.
Yeah, I think that as we go along, those of you that have participated in this, I think that you will notice many things about bass. Maybe if one of you reminds me a year from now, maybe we have a gathering and have a bass conversation, and we talk about where you've gone in your thinking and your experience about how you see it on the surface. It's in having the knowledge at this level is very special, and actively being aware of it, integrating it into your designed thinking, it will bring its own results. And because you're the only generation that's gone through this kind of a teaching at this level, it's going to be very important how you process it and what you get to see from that context. Okay, folks, it has been a pleasure, and I wish you all well, and hopefully get to see you in the next semester. And those of you that are in Ibiza, I'll see you soon. And to all of you, you take care. Bye for now.